Have you ever found yourself yearning for a new challenge? Been looking for a more ancient spiritual or religious experience? Or simply been aching to get away from it all and connect with nature? If so, you might want to consider hopping on a plane to Europe and then walking one of the many weeks-long routes pilgrims have been following for centuries on what is known as El Camino de Santiago, a network of routes converging in northwest Spain at the tomb of St. James. Today we're joined by one such pilgrim, special guest Greg Alexander, who recently returned from his own 2-week Camino along the Portugal coastal route. You'll hear as Greg shares why he went, how he prepared, what he experienced, what he learned, and what he'd recommend for others ready to undertake their own journey. Stay tuned as we explore all this and more right now on the Retirement Lifestyle Show.
Welcome to the Retirement Lifestyle Show. I'm your co-host, Roshan Loungani, here as we usually have Erik Olson and Adrian Nicholson with us. And today we've got a special guest, Greg Alexander, joining us. I'm really looking forward to this story. Greg is a friend of Erik's. So, Erik, I'm going to pass it on to you to introduce Greg.
Yeah, great. So thinking about people that we've known for a while, I think I've known you from about 2005 or 6 or something like that. Is that about right? Yeah.
Sounds right.
So Greg is not has a really interesting background as a PhD chemical scientist, chemical engineer, if I recall correctly, and at one point reached a sort of stage where he said, "Hey, I'm ready to make this transition out of doing what I've been doing professionally for a while, and kind of launched into a new stage of retirement." But Greg is not one for just sort of sitting around. So he's got a consulting business that's continuing to allow him to sort of express back into the world his considerable talents in the Six Sigma and quality and that sort of process engineering space, as well as he has got a giant horde of grandkids and and kids, and so he gets to spend a ton of time with them. I feel like I'm in catch-up mode constantly. I've only got two. I think Greg, if I'm not mistaken, you have 10, so it's pretty awesome there. And but one of the things that Greg was telling me recently that he was going to do was to take a journey walking the Camino de Santiago. And for those of you who don't know what that is, well, Greg is going to tell us about all of that. But I thought, wow, this is a really cool thing. I think doing something big and challenging and different to discover what's out there, and then also to discover in what's inside us, and have both of those processes of discovery going on long journeys is an amazing thing. So, Greg, thank you so much for joining us. I know our listeners are going to love to hear the stories that you'll have to share with us today. Just tell us more. Obviously, I've given a high level. Just tell us a little bit more about how is it that you came to this point of readiness to say, I'm going to go on this journey.
Well, I have to say, in addition to being a friend, Erik's been a outstanding financial advisor, and we kind of joke within the family sometimes. Erik gave me permission to retire in 2017 from corporate America, and recently after this trip, we were in Denver for a family get together. We have a daughter and family in Highlands Ranch near outside Denver, and we were in line at Wuha or some, one of these burrito places. And so, "Are you going to have something to drink?" And Melissa looks at me. I said, "Yeah, I texted Erik. He says we can add drinks to the order." So we kind of joke now and then about, what Erik gives us permission to spend. But
The
anyway, it's
budget Nazi.
You know what? If
so
there was
yeah,
one
and there was
person I
actually
needed,
Erik assigned for a snarky puppy in concert there. So Erik's given us some good advice for Ravinia concerts and stuff. But getting to the question at hand. My interest in this journey really began, as it did with thousands of others, with the movie by, and I'll get his name wrong, but it's Martin Sheen and his son. That's not the crazy one. Emilio Estevez made a movie, wrote it, directed it, is in it, and it's called The Way. Outstanding film if you haven't seen it, but lots of folks have kind of awakened to the way of St. James, or the El Camino de Santiago, or the Jakobsweg I learned in German.
Hmm.
Um, and it started back in the Middle Ages. And I don't get all the dates or the names or the specifics. I can't keep these in my head. I'm an engineer, not a historian. I have a head for a different set of facts. But basically, this is one of the big three pilgrimages in the Christian faith, is how it started. And in this one, Santiago, as the city is now known in Galicia in northwestern Spain, is where, as legend or tradition has it, the remains of St. James the Apostle are buried. And there's this huge cathedral that was built up around that over the years. So around 800 AD, there was the rediscovery of his remains, and they were reinterred up in Santiago. Um, so their traditional routes, and one of the sources of information, this book by James Michener, it's probably the only non-fictional, or one of the few. It's really a travel book. So if you're in half-price books looking for a Michener book called Iberia, don't look in the novels, look in the travel section.
Ah.
But his last chapter is about the El Camino, and a little bit of history about it. So back in the Middle Ages, he talks about, there's this gathering of folks in Paris. I think it's 700 plus miles for that route. And he said there were 7 groups of people. There were the devout lay people seeking a blessing. They're knights who had vowed if they survived battle, they were going to do this pilgrimage. Monks and priests to kind of put a crown on their career in the church. Criminals. The judge would say you can either do this walk or spend 5 years in jail. The beggars, thieves, forgers going back and forth along the route to fleece the pilgrims. The merchants who used the way as a marketplace, and then government agents to keep watch on northern Spain. This was a very interesting area for control. So about 900 miles from Paris to Santiago. The route today, the traditional route that is the basis of the film, starts in a place called Saint-Jean Port du Pied. It's just across the French-Spanish border in the Pyrenees. So the route starts over the mountains and goes through Pamplona, and you can watch the running of the bulls if you go in the heat of the summer, etc. So, um, so my interest sort of piqued my interest, but the movie was made back in, I think, 2005. I saw the film and I thought, that sounds interesting, and just sort of tucked it away. Also, during that time, in the late stages of my corporate career, I was working with a German fellow who became a friend. His wife died of cancer while we were working together, and we sort of bonded. So we were both members of this fraternity that nobody wants to join. And so we just got to know each other better, and we kept up our contact after I retired. And I mentioned, I'm thinking about doing this El Camino thing. Uh, would you be interested? And to my surprise and delight, he said yes. So we were planning to go in the fall of 2000. Long about April 2000, it looked like that probably wouldn't happen. And sure enough, we decided that, a lot of the places closed down where you would stay. So 2000, we delayed because of COVID. So we were going to do it in the fall of 2001. And instead of COVID, it was stupid. About 4 weeks before the walk, I fell on a training hike out in Virginia. Actually, we have a timeshare in Massanutten there near Harrisonburg. And I fell and sprained my ankle. My story is that I went in because Patrice, my wife, said, you're not going to go on this walk without getting that looked at. So I went and got it looked at. So my story is the x-ray machine broke it. It was sprained, but it broke. So, anyway, yeah, I had broken my ankle. So I called Gerhard, and he's so gracious. He said, life happens. So we rescheduled for the spring of this year, and we were able to do it. We talked about routes. So originally, we weren't really sure where we were going to start. He has about 2 weeks that he could spare for me. It being German, he only gets 5 weeks off. And so didn't want to spend all of it on me. So we looked for a route that was about 2 weeks long, and it turns out there's this the second most traveled El Camino is the Portuguese coastal route, or the Portuguese route, and there's multiple Portuguese routes. But we started in Porto, a port city in Portugal, and walked along the coast, and that's they allow 12 to 14 days. We had a little bit of a buffer 16 days, and we did it in 14. So we chose that route because we wanted to do a quasi-complete route rather than sort of plopping in the middle. And people have different reasons. One thing I learned as I did my reading is, your Camino is your Camino. You shouldn't compare it with others. Just like your loss is your loss, your grief is your grief. Don't compare it. It makes no sense to compare, and everyone is different. So that's sort of a long, meandering answer to how I got interested and how I came to the decision of what we decided to do. So we decided we wanted to do about a 2-week journey, and the coastal route just seemed really it would be really picturesque and beautiful, and we were correct.
Yeah, it sounds great. And 2 weeks, that's a long time. And I'm assuming all this was on foot.
Yeah, it's 260 kilometers. That sounds more impressive than 160 miles, I guess. But
Yeah.
yeah, so we did an average a little under 20 kilometers a day, about 12 miles, 0.6 your factor roughly. So a little. So we'd start at 7, 8, 8:30 in the morning, and we'd be done by sometimes 2 o'clock, where you could do your laundry, wash your clothes by hand, usually put it out to dry in the rain sometimes.
Okay. Yeah. And then my next question, Greg, is just leading up to this 2 week journey. Can you kind of share with our listeners what was kind of on your mind, or what were you thinking like leading up to this, or what did you want to kind of get out of this journey? Because, like you mentioned, the experience, the journey's different for everybody. So, what was kind of on your mind going about to go through this long process, this 2 week journey?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So, as Eric will tell you, I'm a hyper planner, and I wanted to do something where there was less of a plan, but not so adventuresome that there was no information. So it was sort of a middle ground between, planning out to the kilometer versus having no idea. So that was part of it, just to experience a little bit of adventure of the unknown, but knowing that there were places to stay along the way. Although with COVID and the restrictions and some of that stuff, there was a little more unknown than what it was maybe pre-COVID in terms of what we were going to experience. And yeah, everybody said, "What were you planning to get out of it?" And I said to myself and to others, "Well, my plan was to find out what I wanted to get out of it." So I didn't really have any specific things in mind other than I wanted to, I really Gerhardt's a great guy, and I wanted to get to know him better, and that could have gone either way. 2 weeks with the same person. Um,
Yeah.
It's a risk.
and yeah, but he's just hilarious. After like 10 or 11 days, we had some sort of a hiccup, and I said, "Are we still friends?" He said, "Just without a beat, were we ever?" Stuff. But he kept apologizing for stuff, and I said, "Gerhardt, stop apologizing. I'm going to fine you €5 every time I'm sorry." So it got to be sort of we probably have 5 or 6 new private jokes, or between us jokes, and that was one. But I've carried that forward. I do some training online, and so I told folks about this thing. People would say, "I'm sorry," before they'd ask a question. I said, €5, and I tell them the story. So it's been kind of fun. But what did I want to get out of it? Just an experience that would create some memories, to get to know Gerhardt better, um, and not much more than that. Some people have, he and I shared that common loss, so just being able to strengthen that bond, and both of us have found new loves. His new love put notes in his backpack to open like every other day, and she put one in my backpack with a Mark Twain quote about the journey with a friend. Is I should have brought it with me. It was a really nice quote, but so it was more about spending time with Gerhardt on something that both of us were curious about, and sounded fun, and had a destination in mind that uh, neither of us knew what to expect. So
And Greg, is the quote, "I found out there ain't no sure way to find out whether you like people or hate them than to travel with them."
yeah, that's a
Is
good paraphrase, something like that.
I looked at so Greg, so if I'm asking you or anyone asks, Greg, what stands out from this journey for you? any certain parts of the story of the journey, stories with Gerhardt, things you saw? What comes to mind?
Yeah, a couple things. One is an earworm that we shared that was this the Happy Wanderer, which is a German song, but it's got, I love to sing dun 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 my backpack on dun da da dun da da. You know that song? No. So
No, I don't think I've
do a
heard that
YouTube
song.
search for the King Singers Happy Wanderer, and that's stuck in my head. So I'm sorry I brought
Hmm.
it up. Now I probably won't be able to focus. And then
Oh no, you're going to be humming it.
it was Easter Monday. We were staying at this. They call them alberges. They're like hostels, but they cater to pilgrims along the way. Very inexpensive, like €10 a night for a bed. Sometimes it's a bunk bed. Sometimes it's a nice bed with sheets. Sometimes, as Gerhard said, a wooden mattress with a veneer of plastic. So that was this place. But there was a German guy who's a nurse who was, and I had my shorts on and sandals because at the end of the day, you take off your boots and try to have your feet recover. And he looked at my leg and it was kind of red. And he said, "That looks angry." He didn't speak really good English, but he said, "You need to get that looked at." So I thought, yeah, that's probably wise. It's annoying, but wise. So there's this thing called the Camino Ninja app, which I highly recommend if you're ever doing it. So you can say, "Here's where I am and here's where I want to go." And it tells you every place along the way that can stay at these pilgrim hostels, I'll call them. And so we looked for one that had medical, some of them just have a picture of a bed. They're all icons. So one had that wasn't too far. We decided to do a short walking day. So long story, not quite so long. I ended up in a Portuguese hospital in the emergency room with most of the medical professionals there not speaking English, but there was a nurse there who did speak English. She stuck me with a needle. I told her beforehand, "Look, I have shy veins. They tell me all the time they have trouble finding my veins. I'm dehydrated. I didn't drink enough water today. I've been walking for 20 kilometers, several kilometers." She said, "Oh, no, you got good veins." She stuck my arm, just like magic. She got the blood sample and then shot a bunch of amoxicillin in me. Then they took me down the hall to get an ultrasound and a doctor exam. And I'm thinking I'm going to have to leave my passport as collateral here to get money out of the machine. So when I get to the front after all this, she writes a number down. I hold up some money so she knows that. And I'm looking, where's the decimal point in these numbers, string of numbers? And it was €22. €22. That's about $25.
Wow.
But I will say that
Oh,
just this week I got a bill for another €113. So call it less than €200 for all of that emergency room. I mean, you can hardly park at Loyola or Northwestern for much less. So that was memorable.
Yeah, and
And
Greg, you
she
said that.
said, "Show this paper if you need to go." She also said, "Take it easy for a couple of days. Don't walk." Well, of course, I nodded and knew that wasn't going to happen. Um, so we needed to keep going. But she said, "Show this to any hospital in Portugal, and they'll have your records." And so that was pretty
Oh, that's
impressive.
great.
wow.
Um, just the people we met people from Lithuania, the island of Madeira, I think it's called, Czech Republic, Slovakia, a lot of Germans on the route, Australia. Um, and it was just kind of fun finding out where people were from and a little bit about their journeys. One of the most memorable things was towards the end, we were staying at this hostel, the kind that just had bunk beds, they're co-ed. This guy was traveling with his, I want to say 5 to 6 year old daughter, and she was walking. They were not walking a full 20 kilometers a day, but she and her dad were playing Uno. She didn't speak any English. Dad spoke pretty good English, and I asked the dad, "You want me to join?" So playing Uno with some Slovakians and this German dad and his daughter, and just watching her joy at playing Uno, this universal game, that was very memorable. That was fun. That was a lot of fun. And then arriving and just rounding the corner and seeing the cathedral, that was something. I'm going to try to share my screen here and show you a couple pictures. Um, share window.
Yeah, it's just incredible the amount of different experiences and the people you meet. It's just a lot all at once. It seems like just a great journey, just a way to meet a lot of people as well.
Yeah. So this is my friend Gerhard. Can you see my screen
Yes.
there?
Yes.
Yeah. So you can see these way markers all along the way. The scallop shell is the symbol of the Camino, and why is that? Back in the Middle Ages, people would make the pilgrimage for whatever reason, and as proof that they did it, or evidence that they did it, they would get a scallop shell at Finisterre at the end of the world, so to speak, and bring it back. So pilgrims very often, most if not all the pilgrims, have this a scallop shell hanging from their backpack, and so these way markers are scattered liberally along the way. There's also times when you'll just see an arrow painted on a lamppost or something to sort of reassure you you're on the right track. When you this is the cathedral. So just as right after we got there, after 14 days of walking, um, this was we got into the single digit. So this is us, and my wife said, "Oh, you have a new look," and this is my I just joined Rotary a couple years ago, so this is my Rotary hat.
A hat.
Um,
Fantastic.
yeah,
And
and
actually,
so
Greg,
I found one thing that
Greg,
was kind of interesting too. I saw 3 Rotary club, one in Portugal, 2 in Spain, so evidences of local Rotary clubs, and so I need to investigate that a little bit more. But that's the cathedral, and when you get to your destination, you go to the pilgrim office to get, if you want, you go to the pilgrim office to get what's called your Compostela, or your certificate, and it's in Latin. If you tell them you've done it for religious purposes, they give you one in Latin. So I'm going to stop sharing and to let me toggle back to yeah. So one of the things that you need to have in order to stay at these hostels is this thing called a credential, and there's several societies. Um, the American Pilgrims on the Camino is the U.S. version, and so every day you get a stamp where you're staying, and every bar, every restaurant, even little sometimes souvenir shops will have stamps. The last 100 kilometers, you need to get 2 stamps per day as evidence that you walk. So to get one of these certificates, you have to have walked 100 or biked 200 kilometers, and this is your evidence. And the beggars and thieves, sometimes the criminals would pay people to do the walk for them, and get their credential stamp back in the Middle Ages. But we don't do that so much anymore.
What possible advantage would they obtain by having a stamped evidence of having made the journey?
Well,
The criminals and
that's where
thieves.
you have to show this when you arrive to get the certificate that you've done the journey. And so the people the mercenaries would take money from the thieves that wanted to get out of their 5 years prison sentence, and so people would basically have
Oh.
surrogate walkers.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
Well, Greg,
So
So the judges had a parole program essentially. If you walk the Camino de Santiago, you get time off for good behavior.
right, you don't have to serve your sentence.
Okay.
It's either 5 years in jail or do the pilgrimage. And so sometimes they would pay people to do it for them while they would just sort of carouse and do other bad things, I guess. I don't know. So those the memorable things, the arrival, the Uno game, the Portuguese hospital, and I would say the first week, just walking along the coast with if the ocean's at your left and the sun is at your back, you're going the right direction. Just miles and miles of boardwalk along the coast, 30 and 40-mile-an-hour winds trying to knock my hat off.
Hmm.
yeah.
So just so that people can visualize what this is all about, there's it's this obviously you've spelled out the distances and you have some options there. You've also mentioned that there are these way stations or these towns and such, and where you have some interaction with other people. You've talked about the hostels. Talk about the number of people that you were. I'm sure it varies from one season of the year to the other, but at least at this point in time, which is springtime or mid spring for you, was it just completely wall to wall people, or was it light enough that you could comfortably walk and carry on a conversation without bumping into one another, or how did that work?
Yeah, so there were periods where we would walk for miles and not see anybody that had the backpack pilgrim. I mean, it's a combination of going through the woods or along the coast and boardwalks, and going through towns and little village streets. And so at the hostels, some were maybe half full, some towards as the roads converge. There's a Portuguese central route and a coastal route, and after they converge, and when you get into Spain across the border, it gets a little more crowded. But the time of year we went is was really nice from weather and a non-crowding standpoint. I don't know if you
Mm.
can see it, but in one of the books, the top graph
Oh,
shows the number of pilgrims over the years increasing, and the bottom graph shows the seasonality of the walk. Now, this is the Francaise. This is the traditional route, the book on the traditional route. And this John Brierley is sort of the gold standard of the guidebooks for the El Camino. For the Portuguese route, the German version is better than his. I learned because Gerhard had the German version, and every German is carrying the same guidebook in terms of making sure you're not losing your way in detail. But this, both of these are pretty good. So April, May is pretty quiet. The fall months, September, October, are more crowded, but not nearly as much as in July, August. And the weather's a little bit nicer too in those out, outer ones. I only have one data point. The Portuguese route used to be about 6 to 10% of the total Camino pilgrims. It's up to a little under 30 now. So the Francaise is still the most traveled, and a lot of folks jump in part way. They don't do the full 500 miles.
is the increase in the Portuguese route because of just the natural beauty that you described, walking along the coast, or what is that?
It's a good question. I'm not really sure. I think it may be because it's less crowded. Like
Okay.
Yogi Berra said, nobody goes there anymore. It's too crowded. So,
Mhm.
that's the traditional route that's through the all through northern Spain, through Pamplona, and etc. But it is beautiful. We met a couple people that had started. We didn't see very many Americans, but we did run into a few. We were, we encountered some at dinner in one place. We went to a place, and there were two Americans that had just met each other on the route, and they met each night for dinner. So,
Mm.
but one of them had started in Lisbon, so
Mm.
a little bit longer than what we did. You have to add maybe a week. And then when we got to Santiago, we were sitting outside the place we were staying. There's a little cafe. There's an Italian lady struck up a conversation with us, and she had done 1,000-kilometer route from Seville, but on bike.
Oh,
So
wow,
she'd
wow.
flown in, rented a bicycle, and done the deal. And and we ran into some. We didn't run into them, but we encountered a few bicyclers along our route as well.
I'm curious. Did you see anybody on horseback?
We did not. I know that some people do that. And there's a rule in terms of how many. It may be the same as bike. You have to go so many kilometers on horseback to get a Compostela.
Yeah, I mean that'd be a good experience and just a different perspective. I gotta imagine you have somewhat of a new perspective, kind of just going back in time and just traveling like how people used to travel and just trying to do your best, kind of traveling back in time, going through a new experience where nowadays we're so used to just traveling in cars or
Yeah,
planes or just being plugged into technology where you're really just taking a step back and experiencing a different way of life that people were used to thousands of years ago. Must have is a really good experience for everybody to try at least once in their life, I gotta imagine.
yeah. You just reminded me of something. A couple of things. One is that a lot of the route was in through woods or boardwalks or parks and city streets, but a lot of it follows. In all of those cases, Roman Road 19, the old Roman road that goes back, two millennia. Um, but your comment about horseback, part of the reading I did, how did I prepare? There are Facebook groups for the Americans on the APOC, American Pilgrims on the Camino. There's specific ones there's one for the Portuguese route. So I would look at it about once every 2 or 3 weeks and just get anecdotes. I didn't pour over it, and I think you can be over prepared and under prepared, and I tried to be somewhere in the middle. Um, I got maybe 4 or 5 books on what to take and whatever, and there's a lot of conflicting opinions. So you kind of take your best guess. The most important thing is your footwear. So I thought I was trained and prepared by walking every day in these boots, but walking every day for 4 miles is not the same as walking every day for 12 miles. And so epic blisters.
Yeah.
But there's this magical stuff, this silicon second skin called Compede, and so we stopped more than once to buy more because
Mm.
we were going through it pretty well. But so one of the books I read, there's a group, a Chicago chapter. There's chapters in a lot of different cities or regionalities called the local American Pilgrim on the Camino, like local chapter. So once a month there's a hike, and most of them are too far for me to drive and justify going on this. But I did it once here in Chicago, and this lady brings this suitcase full of books. So I borrowed a book and just based on the title, and one was a how to prepare, and one was more of a memoir. Well, the memoir, as I read the preface, turns out this woman uh, was a cancer survivor. She'd been assaulted, like she was 1 or 2 years before my matriculation year at Rice University. So I felt this immediate sort of connection with her and her story. And I thought, I got to email her at some point. And so then I was in Germany, and I finally was catching up on some reading of the their quarterly La Concha, I think it's called, which is the shell. And um, she had written a review of Iberia, which also was how she got interested in the Camino. And I said, I really need to email her. So I emailed her with a little bit of my story, and she said, "Yeah, thank you for reaching out. You ever never know when you write a book if it's gone out into the black hole ether that anybody reads it. So let me know how it goes." And I'm working on another uh, book about my horseback
Oh.
El Camino, so I'll be interested in that. Um, so
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 you,
I think reading somebody else's journey can be helpful. And what I took away from that book was your Camino is your Camino. Don't get into this. Real pilgrims don't book their things ahead. Real pilgrims don't send their backpacks ahead. Well, she was a cancer survivor. She did some of the things that quote unquote real pilgrims don't do. But don't judge. Don't judge somebody else's Camino experience. Is another way to put
so walking, I'm really interested in both the sort of the emotional arc of your walk, but also since we're talking about the physical preparation for it. So you carried, I think you tell me, uh, with water? How much was the total pack weight, including with water?
about 20 pounds.
20 pounds. And so you're doing that for 12 miles a day, and you're getting these blisters and so forth. So if you were to counsel us, again, you've just said make your Camino is your Camino. But if you were to counsel others who are thinking, man, that sounds like that'd be awesome, what nugget of wisdom from at least on the physical aspect of the journey itself would you offer? And more weight
Don't
is
overpack.
don't overpack, okay?
I mean, I read, no more than 10% of your body weight. Well, if you're a 90-pound woman,
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm.
it's probably you're going to need to go a little over
Hmm.
that, right?
Hmm.
If you're a 250-pound male, you might want to lose some weight
Hmm.
first.
Hmm. Yeah,
But
yeah.
that's just a guideline, like the Pirates Code, right? More of a
Mhm.
guideline, really. I would prepare by doing some reading uh, in terms of and I can Ann Bourne is somebody who's done the Camino many times. People do it multiple times. One of our hosts had um, done it like 11 times, different routes, and then decided to open up his auberge. But getting back to the question of how to prepare, walk more than I did
Okay.
towards the end, maybe at least 8 miles, 2 or 3 days in a row. Just kind of make sure that because your feet will swell.
Mhm.
Feet tend to swell, so maybe get boots that are a little bit, maybe a half size bigger than you think you need. Um, REI, here's a plug, shameless plug. I became a co-op member, and they have a great selection. They fitted my backpack, so get a backpack fitted by some professional. REI is great. There may be others, but there's different models and different body uh, styles. Shoulder breadth and stuff. So get one that's fitted to your physique, and they did a really good job for me with that. I was really happy with the backpack that they fitted for me. Um, there's conflicting information about whether you need a sleeping bag or just a sleeping bag liner. I just took a liner with a blanket. I took a solar powered phone charger that I used once, and that was to make sure it worked before I left home. I didn't need that, so that was probably a pound that I didn't need, a pound or two. Um, these alberges, there was no time I couldn't find a place to charge my phone once a day. Check out your phone plan. Try to stay disconnected as much as you can in terms of. I got on social media and posted some pictures, but I tried to minimize that. I didn't live for the time when I could find a Wi-Fi and do that sort of thing. So think about what it is you want to get out of it. Maybe a little more than I did, but don't obsess over it. The physical preparation was your question. I think just finding the right. I used merino wool socks. Don't wear cotton socks. Merino wool socks is what I used. Of course, I got a lot of blisters, but I think it was because my shoes were maybe a half size too small. Um, don't overpack in terms of changes of clothes. Uh, I had one I was wearing and one that had been washed the night before. So just two, and these quick dry T-shirts that REI sells that have take sunscreen. Um, what else? What did I
Well,
miss
no,
that you might
that's
think
good. I
of?
think
Physical preparation.
that helps people, I think, picture it. So then you also,
You don't need, you'd asked me, Eric, about water
yeah,
purification. So this is not the Appalachian
okay.
Trail. This is through towns and villages, and you can buy whatever you need, right?
Uh,
If you run out of toothpaste, if you run out of sunscreen, if you run out of Compeed, there's pharmacies. You don't go. There was one time when we went maybe 10 kilometers without a bathroom break or so. My
okay.
daughter said, "What if you need to poop along the way?" Well, right. Everyone poops. That's a kid's book, right? But you're never more than a few kilometers, almost never more than a few kilometers away from a cafe or a place to stop and refresh yourself, inputs and outputs.
So in terms of just kind of stepping back from it, you had, I would imagine there was just filled with anticipation as you get closer and closer to it, and then you get out there. What was, was there sort of can you sort of, or do you feel like you're aware of what that emotional arc was like for you? I mean, did it kind of build and build and build until you got to the cathedral, or what the church, or whatever the term is, or how was that? Or did you feel like, oh, there was a point where you had to kind of revitalize yourself and kind of recover some enthusiasm, or how did that work?
Yeah, so I was reflecting on that thought this morning, and in a small way, when I was working here, I was about 10 miles away from. I didn't really know exactly how far I was away, biking distance from work, and I thought, I'm just going to bike to work. I'm going to start biking to work. And the first day I set out, I had no idea how long it was going to take, if I was going to be late, whatever. I just said, I'm just going to do it. And so it was in a grander scale, a bit like that. I don't really know what to expect. We're just going to do it. Don't know how far we're going to be able to walk each day. So after the first day, we did about 26 kilometers. We had stopped at a information booth along the way and got our first stamp. Well, our first stamp was at the cathedral in Porto, but our first day of walking, and they recommended a place, and it was 26 kilometers. Okay. The next day we did 22, and that was overdoing it. So I would recommend not overdoing it at first. Break in easily, but I think it became a case of um, can we can do this? Yes, we can. Became one of our mantras. Yes, we can. And so just day by day, after about 5 or 6 days, it became a case where I'm not really sure I can put these boots on today, but we did, and we did. And sometimes we would decide at noon, we'd stop for lunch or adult beverage and say, how much further do we want to go? And we get on the Camino Ninja app, and some places take reservations, some don't. So there was a combination of doing some planning or hoping. Hope is not a strategy, but is sometimes all we had, and just living in the moment. And so, long about Tuesday of the second week, we said, I think we're going to get there on Friday, and it's a busy city, so we did make a reservation. But never did we reserve anything more than the night before. And so it was the emotional arc was kind of an initial, can we do it? Yes, we can. And then just sort of flat, experiencing the moment and having fun,
Greg,
building private jokes and that kind of thing. So, I would make notes at the end of every day as to where we had lunch, and I'd mark it in the book on the map just to kind of have a memory. So when I put my photo things together, I can go back and try to piece it together. So I don't know, Eric, if that really answers your question, but everybody's case is different. There wasn't this huge anticipation of the cathedral. I'd seen enough pictures of it, and in the movie, I kind of knew. Oh, I will say that the one memorable thing, I can't remember the name of the. I can look it up, but it starts with a B. But um, there is this sort of event in the Pilgrim Mass. They have a mass 3 or 4 times a day, and it's the cathedral. And occasionally, and I think today it used to be every time, but now you have to pay for it. Is they pull up on this rope, this thing full of incense, and they swing it, and the story is that it was to help with the stench of the pilgrims that had walked for miles, back in the Middle Ages. But it's sort of a tradition now, but they don't do it every time. It's, I guess, kind of an expensive thing. So we got there on a Friday and we said, let's go to the Mass on Saturday. Let's go to the noon Mass. That's sort of the traditional big Mass. And so we asked the lady in the front that lets people in, what time do you need to get here to be able to get a seat? Because they do limit the numbers. She said, well, for noon Mass, probably 11, maybe a quarter to 11. But if you come to the 9:30 Mass, there's no, you'll get in. So we decided to do that. And we thought, yeah, the likelihood of actually seeing this thing swinging was pretty low. But in fact, somebody must have paid their pilgrim. It's like 400 euros, but sometimes people group together and pay it. And sure enough, these guys in robes went up and pulled the thing up, and we saw the deal. So that was an unexpected pleasure.
Roshan, you had a question, I
I
think.
can-
actually, Greg just
Okay.
answered it. I was going to ask about something that stood out, and actually, I'll ask one last one.
Can you see that picture of the thing?
Yes. Maybe a little higher.
Uh,
Yeah, great.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So that's called the bone fumero or something for the. Yeah. Don't have my glasses on, so but you can look it up. Was that you wanted to ask about that?
No, I had two questions, and you answered one about what really stood out. The other one was you mentioned there were some days where you're thinking, I can't put the boots on. Was that because of the intimidation of the next walk, or was that your feet are hurting so bad that it just was painful to put it on? What
It
was the
was the
roadblock?
second. There were
Okay.
epic blisters that I'm not sure that my feet would fit in the boot. So,
Okay.
and I'm not going to be able to do it. But once I got them tied, started walking, that earworm would start, la, 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 la. And so, we'd start finding each other for our apologies and just, and it would be a case where we could walk for 2 or 3 miles in silence. And then we'd start a conversation about Angela Merkel or, fill in the blank. So, uh, we had some interesting conversations about people that we'd worked with. We knew what's going on with so and experiences, and there's a video. I don't know if you've seen it. It was a Berlitz commercial where this guy's sitting down, and he's a German Coast Guard, and so he said, "Mayday, Mayday! We are sinking! We are sinking!" And he says, "This is the German Coast Guard. What are you thinking about?" So, Gary, Gerhard, improve your English, Berlitz. So Gerhard and I had experienced in training. Sometimes we show funny videos to get people back to class on time, and that was one of them. And so whatever once in a while, he says, "What are you thinking about?" It's just sort
I've seen that.
but I would say
Go ahead.
traveling with somebody from Europe made it a lot easier, particularly in this post-COVID world, because getting my QR code set up to be able to fly from Germany into Portugal. They took me to a pharmacy where they took my U.S. COVID vaccination card and generated that wasn't going to cut it. You had to have this intra-European travel documentation. So having somebody there that could help navigate was sort of and that I could fly over there with more than just my backpack and leave stuff at his house. So that was sort of a bonus that, not everybody's going to get that perk, but we found Americans that didn't have that perk and they did just fine. So.
So you had said, Greg, that at one point you had said that you were going to go to discover what your purpose was in going, and or something to that effect. And so, Trek now behind you, do you feel like that discovery occurred for you?
Well, mostly, yeah. I probably need some more time. So people ask me, "Would you do it again?" I said, "Ask me after my blisters heal." Um, and is Patrice listening? If I were to do it again, uh, I would probably do a different route, just to experience something different. I would I would walk more. So I partially discovered the answer. Was it? Am I glad I did it? Yes. Part of what I wanted to get out of it was just to spend time with Gerhard, and that turned out to be exceptionally fun. When I got back, his girlfriend, partner, whatever, had put together this collage of photos that he had texted to her, sent on WhatsApp and text with pictures of him and pictures of me, and it said Gerhard and Greg, El Camino de Santiago, and there was we started out a Saturday before Easter, so we were gone Easter, and so there was an Easter bunny on the bed waiting for me when I got back to his house. So, just the joy of the memories of the time we spent together, me and Gerhard for 2 weeks, plus with him and her at his house for the before and after. She dropped us at the airport. He lives about an hour from Munich, and then picked us up at the airport at 10 at night. And so just seeing the hospitality of that family toward me. Um, I sent him a thank you note with a €5 saying, I did a tally and I think I owe you one. And so he sent me a picture of a big jar that said Chicago on it because we've invited them to come here with a €5 in there. He says, so we're starting to collect for every apology. So, just that kind of um, what I found was just the joy of spending time with a friend to become a deeper friend. Um, and was enough. Was enough.
Yeah, just sharing an experience is great when it's with someone else. It just makes it that more powerful, makes the memory that more
Yeah.
enjoyable. Just looking back at it, that sounds great. Are there any other takeaways or any other pieces of advice to our listeners that are going to go on this, or anything else you would want to share that you might not touched on? You thought that was valuable that you got from this journey?
Yeah. One thing that they say, the packing list should include, and you can buy the shells when you get there, but a shell to put on your backpack. But another tradition is to take a stone, and then there are places to leave a stone on the traditional uh, 500-mile route. There's a very specific spot where folks, and I don't even know the place, but they say you'll know when you get there. There was also one where there were a lot of stones with people's names, painted on the stone. So I had been prepared. I took a stone um, that I had picked up. It was actually my late wife and I and the boys had vacationed 3 different times in Maine, Pemaquid Point, and so I had this stone that I'd taken from the rocky coast of Maine, and so I took that with me as sort of the symbolism of leaving your burden, right? So I didn't really think of it as so much as a burden, just as honoring the memory of my late wife and my late son along the way. Um, but I'm headed out Friday for my 20th wedding anniversary trip. So I'll just say, it's been a fun ride with my new love, and um, so it wasn't. So to answer your question, something people might want to think about in terms of what they want to get out of it. Do you have something that's significant in your life that might be a burden, a loss, or just an honoring of that you want to think about to associate with the stone and just carry that along from home to leave behind. So that's part of the tradition of the Santiago, El Camino de Santiago.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, just bringing something like that with you and just having that experience where you're just so focused on being in the moment amplifies it in a way and makes it more powerful and meaningful and can help you just process it or get through it or add another meaning or memory to it is really great. Thanks for sharing that.
Right. Oh, and yeah, if people are going to go, contact, you sign up, maybe become a member, donate a little money, but request your credential before you go. They don't expire because I'd gotten this before my first attempt pre-COVID, and then I got two of them. I got one for Gerhardt, and it's sort of you can order it with your information pre-printed, right? And then I fill in, the dates after you get there when you're really going to do it. So leading up to it, is this really going to happen? Am I going to get a COVID test fail? Am I going to break my leg again, my other leg? So I did use walking sticks. I would definitely, um, if you can check a bag, put them in there. If not, you can buy them when you get there. But, that's another thing that Gerhardt didn't use them. He didn't call me a sissy, but I can kind of tell he. But he also knew I was a little trepidatious with having been through what I'd been through. So
Yeah, a
just
broken
pause
ankle
for
last
having the
year.
walking stick. But yeah, so get your credential beforehand, and do a little bit of reading. There's El Camino blogs and stuff. So again, don't over prepare, don't obsess over it, but be informed, but not obsessed with preparation. That's my philosophy.
Fantastic. Greg, thank you so much for being willing to share this story with us and kind of allow our listeners to get a flavor for this. You had pointed me once upon a time, I'll mention, to that movie, The Way, and so I would just recommend that same movie to our listeners. It really was illuminating and inspiring, and it gave me sort of of course, it's a Hollywood version of, but it gave me a glimpse of what your journey was going to be like. And I thought it in its own right, it really is a moving tale, and reveals a lot about one man's journey through all of that, and it kind of gives you an idea of, well, maybe what things you could or anyone could discover on that whole thing. So thank you for recommending the film to me, and thank you for being our guest today. Yeah.
One more
Mhm.
recommendation. Rick Steves
Yeah.
does that series on PBS, and he back in 2004 or five, I think he recorded one that includes the El
Hmm.
Camino, a little blurb about that. So you can Google that and find it. I think on YouTube, if not the PBS channel. So the Rick Steves El Camino de Santiago. That gives you a very short kind of flavor. You bite-sized overview of the El Camino. Um, and the other thing about the movie, you see a lot of them wearing jeans. Don't wear
Hey.
jeans; you'll chafe. So
Mm.
it's okay if you're filming for a few hours a day and not really doing the walk. But if you're really doing the walk, the
Okay.
advice is
Duly
don't wear
noted.
jeans. Wear some hiking shorts or.
Well, Adrian or Roshan, any other kind of questions or final thoughts?
I'm not going to wear a suit and tie on this journey.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Greg. This was a wonderful story. Thank you so much for sharing.
Well, thank you for inviting me and allowing me to participate in your podcast.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I hope all of our listeners, I hope you found this helpful. Actually, Greg, I have a client who's planning to do this she has it on her list. She does a walk or a hike every year. So I know she was planning this a couple years ago, similar to your COVID story, but I will definitely tell her to check this out and possibly talk to you about it before she gets this done. For everyone else, thank you for joining us. This has been another episode of the Retirement Lifestyle Show. Please like, subscribe, give us 5 stars. tell your friends and family, and we'll be back next week with another great episode.